Take a moment as we begin to look at what's going on in our world today and also what's going on in our country. I don't know about you, but very often when I read what's happening in my country, when I listen to the news, it's so easy to get frustrated, to lose hope, to feel that nothing will change. I look at the poor people around, and all they want is, I want to live life peacefully. And yet there are certain others who don't allow that to happen. And what's my chapter going to say about this situation? What's my chapter going to say about the persecution of minorities in my country? What's the chapter going to say about the violence that's taking place in our world? The violence against women? No, what's going on? My chapter needs to speak to these if it is to be relevant. Every chapter will allow me to see a part of God that I have not seen before. And that's just not for me or for my congregation. It's for all people. It's for humanity. What's your chapter going to say that people need to hear today? You can come along as we did last week, listen to me speak, knowing that talks never change our lives. Whatever I say is not going to change your life. Only you can listen to what I say and pick out the one or two things that are meant specifically for you. And then at the end of today, to spend some time in quiet with those words. What is this saying to you? What is it inviting you to do? And so it's those thoughts in mind that I want to speak today. The transformation in your life depends on you. It doesn't depend on me. I've taken a text from Deuteronomy where Moses, speaking to the people, says, "You've forgotten the God who gave you birth. You've forgotten that God who's with you the whole time. You're living your life as if that God does not matter. You know, as I do, that I have to try and love all, particularly the ones in my community. And I know I don't. There's certain people I find very hard to love. What am I doing about it? I can go for Mass every morning. It means nothing. If you go to offer your sacrifice and remember your brother or sister who has something against you, leave your offering there and go and reconcile first with your brother or sister. How many of us do that? We have forgotten the God who gave us birth, who made us who we are, the one for whom we take vows now. Last week, we saw some of this. It's about rekindling religious life. And I said to you last week, at the heart of religious life is the search for God. You heard that last week. As you look back on your week, How often were you consciously aware of the search for God? What did you do extra over this last week to prove that you are seeking God? Otherwise, whatever we hear stays with us. It makes no change in our lives. Many of us take this quest for granted. We believe that what we know about God is all there is to know. I don't need to know anything else. I'm quite happy with my understanding of God. I'm quite happy with that. And I wish to say to you that if your present understanding of God is the same as it was 5 years ago, you're relating to an idol. You're in a rut. You're not moving. You're not growing. Because God is love, God is constantly revealing God's self, but I'm not listening. And so my understanding of God is the same as it was. I'm not growing in that search for God. I don't expect to discover anything new. What I have is enough. And that's sad. It's sad to see people who have been in religious life for 15 or 20 years without the desire to grow in that way of life. My journey, in this case, degenerates into routine practice. I'll keep the rule. I'll be there for prayer. I'll go for Mass. I might do some spiritual reading. I'll do my ministry. But my search for God is absent. I'm not growing. And that's true for so many of us. We have so many religious, so many. And yet, look at the state of the world. John Murray, on one occasion, said this very interesting thing. He said, "My thesis is that the dictates of history, our contemporary experience, and the demands of the future tell us that the age of Christianity, indeed all religion, is over. There's a new story that is emerging. A new age is dawning. Because we have got so used to our way of living Christianity, we've forgotten the depths of Christianity. And Christianity, as it is being lived, is not offering answers to today's questions. Note, I said, Christianity as it is being lived. We are not living it the way it is intended to. We are not keeping and holding the vision and mission of Jesus. We have forgotten the God who gave us birth. Martin Luther King said the most beautiful thing. He said, "I'm convinced there is nothing more tragic than to sleep through a revolution." There's a revolution taking place in our world today. Look at the pace of change. We can't even keep up with it. The pace of change. There's a revolution. And many of us, many people in my community are not aware there's a revolution taking place. We are sleeping through that revolution. To me, this is something so sad. We are in that in-between space. And the Pentecostal preacher and woman priest, Stephanie Spellers, she says, God is breaking open this church and pouring us out. pouring out privilege, pouring out empire, pouring out racism and human arrogance in order to remake us and use us
Yo, Jesus. I mistake. I speak it. Huh? What do you do?
to serve God's dream for the world. She's actually using an image over here, an image we're all familiar with. The image of the woman who anoints Jesus when she breaks the jar of perfume and pours it out on him. And she says, that is what God is doing to us. God is taking what is precious to us, our church, our congregation, and breaking it open and pouring out all that needs to be poured out from there. Our privilege, our empire, not God's kingdom, our racism, the way we go for this group versus that group, our human arrogance. God is pouring it out because God wants to create something new. So when you look at your own congregation and see your numbers dwindling and see your age profile getting older and older, and you say, we are dying, realize God is trying to do something new. And so the Pope says to us, to you and to me as religious, in the very first talk he gave to religious after he was elected, he says, wake up the world. And you look at our world, it's a world of pain. And we are being told, wake up. Only recently, last week, few days ago, the Pope said to us, he says, are you asleep? You're walking to the edge of a chasm. You're on the brink of disaster. Can you not see what you're doing? And he's begging the people in the Middle East, stop the fighting. Nothing is solved by war. Nothing is solved. The anger and pain and thirst for revenge is only growing. Nothing is being solved. Wake up the world. Sisters, if you cannot feel the urgency of what the Pope is saying, then you are not praying. If you're not angry enough at what's happening in our world, you are not praying. Our prayer must make us angry, angry that human beings are being treated like that. I look at this picture here in front of me haunts me. The child with tears and hopelessness. How unfair it is that some should live like this while we can enjoy the good things of life. And that's why he said to us, the church must be attractive. Wake up the world. And please look at the next sentence. Be witnesses of a different way of doing things, different way of acting, a different way of living, a different way of praying, a different way of loving. Where are we loving? Where do people see us as people of love? They may see us as people of compassion. Do they see us as people of love? And he says, it is this witness that I expect of you. Religious should be men and women who are able to wake the world up. How can we wake the world up if we ourselves are sleeping? If we ourselves can't feel the pain? When he was being elected and the the names were being called out and the numbers were being written down, and it became clear that he was going to be the next pope, Cardinal Humes, who was sitting next to him, who's died since, turned to him and said, "Remember the poor." And says Pope Francis, he took that as God speaking to him. Remember the poor. And he takes the name Francis in honor of the poor man of Assisi, the one who, after Jesus of Nazareth, was probably the most radical of all saints in the way he captured Jesus' message of simplicity and nonviolence. But it was Francis, the poor man, who was also given a mission, and the mission was rebuild my church. Rebuild my church. And you know the story. And so when Bergoglio took the name Francis, it wasn't just because he was a pope of the poor, but it was because he was following the saint who tried to rebuild the church that was broken at that time. And our church is broken today, and the Pope is trying to repair it. And you can see that in what he's doing with the Roman Curia, with the Vatican finances, and his battle against clericalism. And we are invited to join him in that. He's a religious, and he sees it. And we are religious, and we have to see this. And your gathering and preparing for chapter is the most beautiful time for you to really look at what needs to be done. And so take this opportunity of preparing. Your chapter will only be as groundbreaking as the preparation you put into it, as a prayer that you commit yourself to in the days that lead up to the chapter. It has to be a spiritual experience. It's not about getting an agenda passed. It's not about making decisions. It's about discerning who God is for us at this time. Who is the God we are giving our lives to? And the way we act will be according to the God we are relating to. At the same time, at that meeting, he said the great changes in history were realized when reality was seen not from the center, but from the periphery. In other words, he's saying to us, don't listen to the dominant culture. The dominant culture is not going to save us. The leaders of our nations are not going to save us. They're coming from the center of the picture. They're coming from power and affluence and prestige and influence. But on the periphery is loneliness and pain and brokenness. And it's when we are immersed in that situation that we can see what the gospel is inviting us to do. And so Jesus invites us to be kingdom people, not empire people. And as I've said to you, some of you before, the kingdom is a place where we see what happens when God is in charge, not Caesar, not Pharaoh, not Modi, It's where God is in charge. And he keeps on his most famous saying of his, I want a church which is bruised, hurting, and dirty because it has been out on the streets. Not a church which is confined to its own situation and center, where the center is the church. No, he says, you cling on to your own security in that case. I want to be out in the streets and to risk. And the same thing can be said about my congregation and your congregation. Are we protecting our institutions, or are we here for the kingdom? 9 times out of 10, we put the institutions first. Francis sees the world differently from his immediate predecessors. He's inviting us into the space occupied by the early followers of Jesus. Before the church sold itself to Constantine and became the power in the world. Before that time, when it was on the periphery, when it was among the persecuted, the church is at its best then. He's inviting us once more to put on the mind of Jesus. Have this mind in you, which was in Christ Jesus. It does not count equality with God a thing to be prized. He empties himself. The secret of Christianity, emptying ourselves. It goes against everything that the dominant culture says. The dominant culture invites us to add more and more and more. The gospel of Jesus says, let it go. Let it go. And as you prepare for chapter, are you ready to let some of your thoughts go? Are you ready to let some of your dreams go? Because unless you create that space inside you, God cannot enter. At the moment, the space is too full of our plans, our dreams, our desires. And where are they coming from? You and I are told to be fishers of men and women. You remember again early gospel, Mark's gospel, when he has Andrew and Peter and then James and John, he chooses them. And he says, follow me and I will make you fishers of men and women. It's an extraordinary image that is used there. Because you and I know that when we go fishing and we take fish, we catch fish and take it out of the water, we are taking the fish out of their comfortable surroundings. They're going to die. They're going to die to their old way of life. And says Jesus, that's what I want you to do as religious, as my followers. I want you to take people out of their comfort zones. The Pope says, wake them up. Jesus says, take them out of their comfort zone. Fish them out of the waters in which they're comfortably relaxing. Force them to see a new way of living life. And that's my mission and your mission. What creativity will our chapter give to that mission? In a lovely book written about 3 years ago, Isabel Wilkerson says, perhaps it is the unthinking acquiescence, agreeing to, the blindness to one's imprisonment that is the most effective way for human beings to remain captive. We are captive. We are not free. And the sad thing is, we don't even know that we are captive. That's a sad thing. We think we are free, but actually we are slaves to our way of thinking, to our comfort, to our ego, to our addictions, to our prejudice, to our culture. We are slaves to that. We are not free. We now haven't reached the stage where we can let it go, let it go. People who do not know that they are captive will not resist their bondage. And good propaganda with governments does that. So many of our people slavishly believe what the government says to them. And so they're quite satisfied with the little sops that government gives, a drop in price here, a little gift over there. And they take that and they think they're free and they think they're well off, whereas actually they're selling their souls. No one is protesting, no one is challenging. Does that happen in my congregation? Blindness. We are like the people who pass my brother or sister on the ditch. We've got used to the injustices taking place every day. In the beginning, we might have been upset and protested. Now we don't. It's happening so often in so many places, it's becoming part, we accept it. We accept it. We're like the priest and Levite in the parable who pass by on the other side as our brother or sister lies ravaged in a ditch. Injustice becomes part of the way we live. Our silence is deafening. My church is an institution who's so concerned about its reputation, its inner working, the purity of its worship, and so on. It's so concerned about its inner life. It's as if the church has been set up for the church. And you and I know that that's not true. The church is there for the service of the gospel. We're about Christianity, not churchianity. Our world is in turmoil and we are sleepwalking or burying our heads in the sand. And when was the last time we challenged our bishops? And we know our bishops themselves are human and they need our support and they are frightened. And you can see what happened on Republic Day when they all went and praised the Prime Minister. And at the same time, look at what's going on with minorities in our country. Look at Manipur, one of the worst examples. And to go and break bread and sit with someone, granted, they were in a difficult position, but no one had the courage to say no. And it was lay people who began to make a noise about it and condemn it. When was the last time we challenged our bishops, however gently we do it, with as much respect as possible, but to speak the truth? Because that's why you and I are religious. As I said to you last week, we are here to keep alive the dangerous memory of Jesus. It's dangerous because it can lead to our crucifixion. But it doesn't mean because it can lead to that we have to keep quiet. We are never allowed to keep quiet. And leadership, more than any other time in its history, has to be a speaking leadership. So, what do we do? The gospel tells us, go into your inner room, your heart. Go in there. Go into the depths of your own silence. Close the door. And there in the secret place, listen to the one who will speak to you. So in times of confusion and persecution and pain, in times when we don't get the leadership we need, that's the time we go into our inner room and try to listen to the voice of wisdom there and allow that wisdom to show us what we need to say and do. The most dangerous thing we can do is to listen to our hearts. It's the most dangerous thing to do, because listening to our hearts is listening to the Spirit. Jesus says, the wind blows where it will, and the wind is the Spirit of God. And we know that one of the places that the Spirit of God blows is in the human heart. The sad thing is, our hearts are so noisy, we can't hear the Spirit. And so Jesus tells us, when you pray, go into your inner room, go into your heart. Give God a chance. Stop your activity. Sit in silence. Stop talking. Prayer is not talking. Prayer, more than talking, is listening. Hear, O Israel. The first words of the Jew says every morning, hear, O Israel, listen, listen. What is God saying to you today? But we are so busy telling God our plans, we don't listen to what God is saying. And it's a conversation. We are only half the conversation. Stop and listen to God. I think at times in religious life, we try not to have the silence. So when we gather for our prayer and our adoration, we fill it with reading and reflection and someone giving a talk, instead of using that moment as a community, come together, sit in silence. When was the last time we did that? Sit in silence for 15 minutes or 20 minutes. Don't say anything else. And at the end of the 20 minutes, get up in silence and go off. The most dangerous thing you can do is listen to your hearts, because now you're allowing God into your life. That's dangerous. We are scared of silence. Only by staying in the cave of my heart and operating from that sacred space can I make the God of Jesus visible in my life. And when I do that, suddenly I become aware of the reality around me. It's when you do this, you'll be able to wake up the world, because you'll have inner knowledge now. You'll see things as they really are. What humanity needs is turn around, change our thinking about God, return to Jesus, and open up his way in the world and in our church. And what does this mean for us? want to mention 2 or 3 things that you look at as you're preparing for chapter. One of these is this whole thing of fake news. 2 countries particularly where we can see this uh, lived out so clearly. One is India, the other is United States. The fake news, lies that are being told, and the tragic consequences of these lies, and how rumors are spread because of lies, and how people are pushed into action because they believe the lies. And people with this sort of agenda are creating havoc in our society. And today, with WhatsApp and X and all these different platforms, Facebook, it's so easy to spread fake news. Where am I in that? Do I keep on heedlessly, without thinking, receive a message and pass it on to others without saying, is it true or not? So I become part of the problem. You have the curse of caste in India. I don't have to explain it to you, but I want you to be aware of it and to be aware of how it works itself out in everyday life. It's a deliberate creation of an exploiting class so that they can continue to persecute others and take advantage of others and exploit others. Once you name people as enemy or as an inferior group, then you can get rich at their expense. Male dominance and patriarchy. And look at that. I know you are very involved in it in some of your own ministries, but I want to highlight it. There's a whole movement of the feminine taking place today. And because of that movement, men are being emboldened to become even more domineering, to stop women from claiming their rights. Climate change and rape of the earth. All these have to be center stage as you prepare for chapter. God, what are you saying to us? Where do you want us to intervene? That's what you are asking us the whole time. And that's what your prayer is to be. The Syrophoenician woman. She kept on speaking, even when the apostles told her, shut up, and they'd go away, go away. She kept on. She kept on with her request. She knew that her daughter's condition was not the will of God. God does not want us to suffer. And she would not remain silent. And so she says, Syrophoenician lives matter. And she gets Jesus to expand his own understanding of God and to see the world as she saw the world, as a suffering mother. That is a periphery that Jesus enters. Not to speak is to speak. If you keep quiet, your silence is saying you agree. Not to act is to act. It's saying I agree with the things as they are. A picture that I love, this one here of the woman who washes Jesus's feet. And more than the woman over there, I want you to focus on the men at the back – and how outraged they are. They wanted to spend time with Jesus. They invite him. He sits down over there. They're getting ready for a meal and a good conversation. And next thing, this woman comes in. And they are furious. They don't say anything in front of Jesus, but Jesus can see from their face. They don't have to say anything. Look at their body language. And then after telling them the story and asking them who loves more, and they say the one who's been forgiven more. And then Jesus comes with that most beautiful question. And he says, do you see this woman? To me, when I first adverted to that question, for me, it was a deeply spiritual experience, realizing what Jesus was asking. Because I could say, time and again, I was like these men. I never saw the woman. Like them, I saw the prostitute. Like them, I saw this shameless slut coming in over here. Like them, I saw this brazen creature barging into someone else's house. I never saw the woman. I never saw my sister. As you look at the pain in our world, the question is, am I holding that pain as a brother or a sister? Or am I facing the pain as a judge? All of them over there, they are judges. They're not her brother. They're judges. And look at the mentality that we are invited to put on. And finally, coming along over here to this scene where he says, forgive them. To say to yourself, how is it possible for someone to forgive after everything that has been done to him? How is it possible? When you're over there and there's so much hate and abuse, how can I keep on loving? I want you to have a look at this picture here. It's a picture taken in 1936 of a shipyard in Hamburg, and all these are workers in the shipyard. And it's the time with the rise of Adolf Hitler and Nazism. And he was addressing a rally. And look at them all. They're all standing there, all with their hands out in the Nazi salute, except for one man in that crowd who's got his hands folded. He sees something that the others do not see. He sees the folly of what these people are doing. He was himself a German, but he was in love with a Jewish woman. And because he was in love with the Jewish woman, he was able to see that hatred and scapegoating people is not the way into the future. And while everyone else there is caught up, he sees differently. And we have to ask ourselves, the same, what's going on? What's going on in my life? The prophets in my society are able to see things. I can't see it. Until you go into that inner space, you will not see it either. Everyone is caught up except him. And then we had this picture over here also the sister in Burma, you remember the picture where she comes there and she asks the army to shoot her, not to shoot the little ones behind her. It's a totally different way of acting. She's able to do it because she's able to get in touch with her love. Love your neighbor as yourself, says Jesus. And look at the words, love your neighbor as yourself. Your neighbor is yourself. He doesn't say, love your neighbor as you love yourself. No. Love your neighbor as yourself. Your neighbor is an extension of you. What happens to my neighbor affects me because he's an extension of me. She's an extension of me. We are all related. We're all one. She was able to see that. And says the Pope, we are called to promote a culture of mercy based on our own encounter with people. So I cannot turn away. I cannot be indifferent to the plight of my brother and sister. And he says, the works of mercy are handcrafted, each one made by itself. It's not created on a large scale. You treat each person as an individual. And so each day there can be hundreds of acts of mercy, different ways in which we react to people. And so, sisters, as we come near the end, my response, I take it from The Lord of the Rings, the trilogy by Tolkien. And he says over there with Frodo, he says, I wish it need not have happened in my time. In other words, all these terrible things that are going on, I wish they didn't happen today. I wish I didn't have to worry about it. And the wise man Gandalf says, so do I. And so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. We are here at this time in history, at this time in the evolution of humanity. You and I are here. We have to decide what to do. And so the spirituality of justice and advocacy is for us. I cannot continue to believe, as I used to believe, in an all-powerful interventionist God, that I will pray and God will then come and do things because God is all-powerful. God will enter into my world and do things. No longer can I believe in that. God is revealed to me as vulnerable and suffering and taking part in human brokenness. In the pain, God is present. We are waiting for God to intervene, but God is waiting for us to collaborate. As I said that to you last week, the spirituality of justice demands my intervention. I am a co-creator with God. And so I leave you with these questions. How do I continue to keep my heart open and my mind aware of the plight of my people as I prepare for chapter? How can I continue to keep my heart open and my mind aware of what's going on in my world? Who are the people that I need to be with at this time in history? I'm a co-creator of the future. What steps can I take to do this? So both these questions are there for you. I said to you right at the beginning, the talk is not going to change your life. It's what you do with it. It's your taking the words, not all the words that were there meant for you. I don't know, but you know. And God uses us to co-create, knows what you need. And you take these words that touch you and you go into the silence of your heart, into that inner space, and listen to God. Listen in the silence. So that's what I wanted to share with you.
Reverend Brother Philip, on behalf of our provincial sister Brahmadin and all the sisters, I extend a heartfelt thanks for your interventions on who our God is and how do we make God visible in today's unrestful and disturbed world. You have invoked in us the quest for God and to put on the mind of Jesus and serve humanity and whole of creation. The simple yet in-depth spirituality you shared with us will enable us to better prepare ourselves for the forthcoming chapter. Thank you, brother. By the fervor and dedication with which you serve, especially the 2 sessions conducted for us, in spite of the untimely sad news last week. Our prayerful assurance for you as we move further to wake up the world. Thank you, brother, once again. May the Lord bless and reward you.
Thank you, sister. Thank you very much. That's good. Okay, sister.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, okay, take care. God bless. Bye, everyone.